Welcome to this conversation with Yael Eiserike. And Yael is a former lawyer and therapist and lives in Los Angeles and has had a wide variety of experience and training and is now serving many women lawyers and others, especially are going through career transitions and challenges.
Absolutely. People who ultimately choose to leave their career altogether, or people who find shifts within it or ways to make it work for them. So kind of the whole gamut.
You specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy. Is that correct as well?
Yes. It's actually a lovely connection to the law. I didn't know that I would find my home there as a therapist, but it's basically nurturing supportive Socratic questioning. So it just made sense for me.
Like I said, as a former lawyer and a licensed clinical social worker and therapist, specializes in high stress professionals, career changers, yes, lawyers with balance. Let's just start with your own legal journey.
Sure.
And how did you decide to become a lawyer and your path into lawyering?
So I went to college and was undecided if I wanted to go into mental health or be an attorney. I double majored in political science and psychology, took the personality tests and talked to folks at the career counseling center and got lots of data from people in my life and ultimately chose to go to law school. And I can say this now with some hindsight and life experience, because frankly, it was the sort of more prestigious option. It felt bigger and fancier, and with my naivete in my early 20s, that seemed important. So I took the LSAT. I went straight through to law school.
Straight through from college to law school?
Straight through. College to law school, which I realized was also very much rooted in anxiety, because everyone who's ever asked me about becoming a lawyer and going into law, I've always said, go work at a firm for a year and then decide if that's what you want to do. I would have given myself the same advice. I wish I had, but frankly, I was just too scared to go into the uncertainty of work. And I've always been really good at school. I always enjoyed school. School was very clear in terms of you study for the test, you get the grades, you get the gold star, move on. I never really seriously considered not going straight through. So I went straight through to law school, found myself in an environment with lots of really intense, competitive folks. A lot of them were really smart and curious, and I connected well with. But I definitely had moments where, again, now with some hindsight, I wasn't really following a path that made sense for me, but it was itch I needed to scratch. That's kind of how I've now come to understand it. I finished law school. I went to go work at a national firm, and I've replayed it in my mind many times over, and particularly when I was kind of deciding what to do next when I was at the firm. I would still go back to the same firm. I liked the area of law. I liked the people I worked with. In the grand scheme of things, it was a pretty good work-life balance for a large firm. It really wasn't the firm. And again, that was part of my thought process. I'm jumping ahead, but when I decided to leave, thinking, well, was it a firm? Was it the area of law? If I had to do it all over again, I would still do the same thing.
Jump forward and take us to that time where you're like, okay, even if it's a great firm, even if it's great people, even if it's kind of what was going on for you that you started to question?
So I did employment defense litigation. And the reason that's relevant is if you work at a large enough firm, going to trial is a thing that doesn't happen often. So it's kind of the pinnacle thing that's the most and biggest career-wise. And I was lucky enough to have a senior partner who had really taken me under her wing as this lowly junior. She was very kind. And she brought me onto a case that happened to go to trial. And so really early on, I got to go, and all good people, nothing bad to say, but it was in Northern California. And at the time I was training for the LA Marathon and really committed to training. And so I would get in my car and I would drive up north, and I would be there for the week, and I would then drive back. And it was initially supposed to be 2 weeks, but it became a 6-week trial. And so I spent a lot of time driving through the California Central Valley. And this was before podcasts, before, frankly, hands-free driving. I just had time. And it was a lot of forced time and staring out and looking at Central California and thinking, what am I doing? Is this what I want to be doing? This is supposed to be the best and biggest and most exciting. And I am still feeling kind of empty and unhappy. It was really those drives that started the process of my decision to leave. And I didn't know what the leaving would look like and what that would mean, but I knew that something wasn't right.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Like forced time of kind of stillness, even though you were driving, you were moving, but like you had to just sit there and drive. Like you couldn't really do anything else. Yeah.
Exactly.
Reflection. Interesting. What did that lead you to?
I started, I think, with the process that most people do, which is what's the smallest amount of change I can make? And would that be sufficient?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, maybe it's the firm. Again, this is my thought pattern that I was mentioning earlier. Maybe it's the firm. No, I don't really think it's the firm because I have friends at other firms and kind of some of the challenges that they're having are very much the same challenges that I'm having. So I don't really think it's that. Okay, well, maybe it's the area of law. No, I don't think it's the area of law. I liked employment law largely because it was people focused, which again, should have been a tip off. My favorite things to do at work were always talking to the clients and talking to witnesses, talking to people, which again, should have been assigned to me. I didn't like reading and writing and researching. I was able to do it, but it was a slog for me. I was lonely and I spent all of this time by myself and I just wanted to be around people. Then I thought, well, maybe it's being at a firm. Maybe I should look at the government, or if there's a junior in-house role, or maybe nonprofits, or again, sort of moving, I'm imagining kind of a bullseye, moving further out in the rings of like, well, yes, that would be more change, but it's not that radical of change. And I finally remember exactly the moment I decided. I was in my old apartment, sitting on my couch in my pajamas, and I finally said, I'm too young to do something that's less bad and less painful. Like I need to make a change and do something that's really going to give me joy.
That's so good. Wait a second. I'm too young. Or like fill in the blank, like too old, too middle-aged, like whatever it is. We all think we're too something. Too young to take something that's too, say it again.
I'm too young to do something that's less bad. It's essentially to resign myself of sort of meh at best.
At best. I'm too young to do something less bad.
By the way, I'm very thankful I had great mentors in law school because I had gone to law school to do public interest, thinking that's what I wanted to do. They all said, go work at a big firm, learn law, pay off your loans, beware of the golden handcuffs, and then you can choose what you want to do. Which, by the way, great advice, fabulous advice. And so I had taken it to heart. I was fortunate enough to not have taken on a huge amount of debt. I was still driving the same old car. I didn't have huge financial obligations other than my loans. At the time, was single, no kids. And I thought, well, if not now, then when?
So what did you do to help you figure out what next?
Similarly, I thought, so what are my skills? What are the things I'm good at? Not what do I enjoy, but what am I good at? I thought, well, I'm good at writing. Again, didn't really enjoy it, but I'm a good writer. Well, maybe I should look at something like in PR or marketing, and just looked at things that had kind of components of my skill sets that would be the most easily transferable. Again, trying to take the path of least resistance rather than, okay, I'm going to uproot my whole life and go back to grad school. But ultimately I said, again, if I'm going to make a switch, I need to make a switch that is in the affirmative, not just in less bad.
That was your driving. That was your North Star now. Like better, not less bad.
Very well said. That's exactly it. When I finally decided I wanted to be a therapist, it actually came back to, why did I want to go to law school in the first place? Well, I wanted to help people. Oh, okay. I really enjoyed my psychology classes. I've always enjoyed people. But the reason, frankly, I never did it was it felt too easy. Why don't I go do that? I naturally do that anyway. Strangers not knowing that I'm a therapist, well, I'm often the person on a plane who just gets told somebody's life story, or at the gym, and I enjoy learning about people. And so I finally said to myself, well, this is silly. Why don't I just go do that thing that I enjoy and that I'm naturally kind of inclined to be doing? Beautiful. And so I decided to go back to school. I remember it was end of October, beginning of November. I had to take the GRE for a couple of the programs I applied to. And because I had a trip that I had already booked for December and early applications were due, I essentially made the decision on a Sunday and found out that the following Saturday I would have to take the GRE to be on time for my applications. Hadn't taken standardized tests. I hadn't done.
Oh, you had taken the LSAT and you had taken.
I mean, in a while.
Right. It's more like the SAT than the LSAT.
Absolutely. I bought a thin little Princeton review just to know what it was that I was going to do. Tried to teach myself some math again. Said, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. I'll do my best. And just went and took it. And I remember I was traveling. I was in Australia when I submitted my first application.
Wow.
I was on vacation and it just felt so empowering. Like, yes, I did this. I'm going to really get to do this.
And were you still at the firm?
Yeah, I'm still at the firm. In fact, one of my favorite moments of that was that I was still working and did all of my applications. It felt like a secret that I was holding on to. I told one close friend who I'm still friends with, and people outside of the firm knew. And then when I finally was accepted and had decided and had signed that, yes, I'll be going here, it just felt like, okay, now I can finally tell people. It was such a release. And every single person I told was really supportive, congratulatory, and wished me the best.
Yeah.
Again, I think it was because I wasn't going to a rival firm or anything like that.
Right.
I had one person at the firm who said to me, like, you're always too nice to do this.
You're always too nice to do this. It was confirmation. Yeah.
Essentially, it tracked.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
A lot of will members, when they go to give notice, they have a lot of trepidation. Most people aren't going to another firm, but even if they were and are surprised about how nice people are and how like often they'll get something from someone that's like, oh, I wish I could have done that too.
I definitely got some of that as well. I gave notice and I traveled and then I started grad school and my life couldn't have gone more sort of in a 180 direction, living in a nice apartment and working at a nice law firm in Century City. And then all of a sudden I was in grad school. My first internship was at a middle school in South Los Angeles. I had 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Just a wild shift in my life. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I ended up actually working with kids for a long time until I had my own. And then I realized I couldn't work with kids. And it was funny because this whole part of my professional life, having been an attorney, never really went away. It was still there. And so when I ended up working, when I made the switch and went into private practice, I thought I'd really like to work with lawyers because I think I understand them better than most. I'm very practical in my approach. And I think if nothing else, attorneys appreciate pragmatism. And so I really focused on working, frankly, with female lawyers who are dissatisfied. Very overlapping community. I just found a way to bring all of these things together. And I can't say any of it was done intentionally, but it just kind of aligned beautiful.
So I've got two questions. So what was the noise in your head or the barriers that you were facing internally to like go back to school, to maybe take on more student loan debt? It sounds like you had gotten this good advice from your law school professors, like don't live beyond your means, don't get too attached to the golden handcuffs. Because I think that's a place where people are like, I can't take on more debt or I can't go back to school. What was your self-talk around that?
Interestingly enough, and this will show you how absolutely naive I was when I went to law school, I didn't go to law school to make money. It was kind of a surprise. I really did want to do public interest work. I did really want to help people. And so in that regard, I had lived fairly below my means. And so I figured if I have to tighten my belt straps, like my belt, I will do it. I can do it. It'll be fine. I had started saving a little bit of a cushion for when I made the decision that I needed to do something different. So I'd started a little bit more aggressively saving. The biggest barrier for me, and again, I don't know what it is for other people, but the finances were part of it. I knew that I could figure out a way to do it because I wasn't in law for the money. So I would be fine figuring out another way to make it work. But the biggest part for me was my own ego, was the prestige of being a lawyer. And I will tell you, there is some truth to how people perceive you, because when I used to tell people, oh, I'm an attorney, I would get the response of, oh, you must be really smart. And then I would tell people, well, I'm a social worker or I'm a therapist. And I would almost get this condescending head pat, like, oh, you must have a really good heart. That's so nice. And I think part of it was that, and getting more comfortable with the fact that, well, who cares? How much did that really matter? But in all honesty, I think that was a big part of it for me, of how are people going to perceive me? Is this crazy to leave something I've worked so hard for to take this big risk? Or at least at the time, it felt like a huge risk.
Thank you for addressing that. I think that the noise in the head, I was on a call yesterday on one of our community calls, and two people I was working with were both saying, I want to pursue these other things, but I want to find that pragmatic next step. So what helped you get over that, the prestige, and people are going to think X, Y, and Z about me, and I'm going for it?
I mean, it's sort of that fierce autonomy of, well, this is my life and I'm the one living it. And I'm the one who is feeling the feelings and having inside my body. I'm the one that's experiencing these things. I will just add, again, nothing to do with the firm or the people or anything, but there were multiple times I would find myself not only having dread on Sundays and having mysterious stomach pains and all this, which is really just anxiety, but I would find myself crying as I was driving into work. I mean, if that isn't a clear-cut sign that there is something wrong, I don't know what is. And part of it is how normal it is in law firm culture to be unhappy. I knew I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to subject myself to that kind of a life. I remember so clearly thinking while staring at my computer in my office that I wasn't meant to do this. This is not who I am. And not because I felt like what I was doing was wrong.
We're not casting aspersions. It's just about you.
It just never felt like the right fit. It felt too hard.
So interesting, because it's definitely one of the things we do and will is help people what are your strengths? What are your natural gifts and talents? What comes easily and naturally to you that people turn to you for? It's not just you who went through that, right? I think there's so much cultural conditioning, normal, you have to grind through things and white knuckle through things. And if it's too easy, you didn't earn it. I think there's so many messages about that. How are you innately designed? I'm starting to use human design with some clients, right? And they're seeing oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm designed for. It's not this, it's that. Yeah,
exactly. And it was interesting for me because once I made the decision, all of a sudden it felt like I had a lot more bandwidth to come up with solutions and ideas. So part of the way I was able to finance my graduate program, and the reason I ended up ultimately picking the program I did, was that I got a job at the university. And so I was in charge of a first-year building. So let me just paint the picture. I went from living in a nice one-bedroom apartment in West Hollywood to living on campus at a first-year building with 18-year-olds.
So it's like a resident, advisor or something, a higher level than an RA. Yeah.
So I would supervise college kids, have to deal with 18-year-olds getting drunk and roommate conflicts, all of the things that happen first year of college. And I was responsible for building a 200 plus students. I had a meal plan, and I'm so grateful for that job, not only because it afforded me the ability to go back to school, but I didn't have to take on any additional debt. And I was able to make grad school work for me financially.
I love that. And it gave your ego a real workout too, no doubt, of look, everyone's different. There's no one right path, whether people leave law and do something else or stay and choose to love it and figure out their path. That must, from the prestige and worry about how people would perceive you to living on campus and supervising students and eating that meal plan. What was your inner dialogue to get through that?
I felt so free and so empowered that it really wasn't a thing to get through. I think I've always used my sense of humor as a way of my own coping strategy. I mean, there were definitely moments where I was dealing with roommate conflict over the microwave or temperature, what have you. And I was thinking to myself, I used to go to court. I used to be in a fancy office. And how is this my life? That I would chuckle at myself that I had made this switch. But it really wasn't a hard thing to get through because it felt like this was an uncharted path. This was one that I was kind of carving out for myself. It didn't feel like I was grinding or pushing or white knuckling.
You said it. I mean, I felt free. You felt free and you weren't incurring more debt. You're I'm going for it. You decided not to care what other people thought.
I still remember the feeling I had when I turned in my parking pass at my old firm and they gave me a visitor guest parking so I could leave. And I
Yeah.
drove out and I was just never going to have to be back. It was just the most empowering freedom. And again, I think it helps that I also paired that with, I took a backpacking trip through Southeast Asia afterwards and met some really neat people and went by myself. And it just was like, you know what? I'm affirmatively choosing these things in my life. And I felt very empowered. So there was no need to wrangle with myself.
Yeah. You're my kind of gal. I did that also before going to grad school. I was like, I'm going to grad school, but first I'm going to go backpack Southeast Asia.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
wonderful.
I never regret it. Like, it's just a thing. Always so glad I did that. Let's get talking to about, so you became a social worker, you had some other jobs, and then you said, oh, maybe I can help lawyers. Take us into that. And then I'd love to hear also what you see commonly presenting in the
Absolutely.
women lawyers, especially that you work with.
I left community mental health in part, I would say, because of COVID, during COVID, because working at a community mental health agency when things were virtual, but still partially in person, it was really difficult. I'd never seriously thought about going into private practice. At the time, my kids were at home. My husband, who was a writer, his writer's room had just closed. And so I said, well, you know what? Let me look at this world that exists. I've never really seriously considered it. I was pretty happy at my old agency. And I found a group practice that gave me a lot of flexibility and I could set my hours and I could see who I wanted to see. And I thought, well, this could be great. And so again, that was kind of the next leap, which didn't feel quite as large, even though there was a family kind of attached this time, but it didn't feel quite as large because I had done scary things before. And I had to really think, who is my ideal person I want to help and work with? Who do I really understand? Who can I really speak to? And I mean, it's women, I'd say in their early 30s who are professionals, honestly, lawyers, because they tend to have some common themes, a lot of anxiety, perfectionism, struggling to say no. So that obviously impacts the work-life piece, trying to do it all and not quite doing any of it.
Feeling like they're doing it well.
I'm trying to think of other kind of common themes, but a lot of women who've always been really good students are sort of have always sat in the front row, never disruptive, always took good notes, always got good grades, always got gold stars. And now that they're leading these adult lives, I hear a lot of them say kind of things I heard myself say, which is, I've done everything right. Why am I not happy? That's usually a starting point. But I find that when working through kind of the work side of things, sometimes some of those patterns also emerge on the personal side of things, relationships and families and friends, all that as well.
And so I want to get to questions from the people who are here today for you also. What do you find gratifying in your work now with these women lawyers? This is very, very similar to women who come to Will. Tremendous amount of anxiety. I've done everything right. Why am I not happy? I got all the gold stars and struggling with perfectionism, struggling with easing up on the gas pedal, worrying so much what other people think. And of course, in Will, we work on changing those things through a lot of mindset work, which is definitely connected, which is rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT. Yeah. What do you feel like is most helpful to them that's also really gratifying for you?
I would say there's kind of maybe two buckets of things. One is when sort of obvious, immediate crises abate. So for example, if I have somebody who comes in and has terrible panic attacks, and then we're able to do through exposure work, their panic attacks are gone. They're relatively treatable. And I also work with insomnia. So if insomnia gone, panic attacks gone. So like really obvious things have really dissipated. That is deeply gratifying. But I would say probably more so is when I find clients have really long-standing patterns of, I'm at this point, I always make a left. I always make a left. I always make a left. And the first time that they make a right and the world doesn't stop, And then they show up and they tell me about it. That was their homework, whatever it might be that's specific to them. And they made a right and the world just kept going and it was okay. And then all of a sudden, it's like this opens up this world of possibilities.
Yes. Just quickly, like analogously, in Will, when they set a boundary and they say no and they don't get in trouble or nothing bad happens and the world doesn't end. And they're like, oh, I could say no. They teach this boundary setting process and they do it. And then they see, I can take another step and another. I can keep expanding that boundary.
Absolutely.
So cool.
So I did consider other career possibilities. Like I said, I thought about PR. I thought about publishing. I thought about other things that were more based on my skill set rather than my natural kind of inclinations and things I enjoyed doing. And I ultimately chose to do social work rather than getting a PhD because I didn't want to do research. I wanted to work with people. I opted to do an MSW rather than a PsyD because a PsyD is a lengthier degree and more expensive. And frankly, the only real difference is that you can do testing with the PsyD that didn't really interest me that much. I also picked an MSW over an MFT because at the time thought, well, in case I ever want to do macro work, that's a nice way to bring law, kind of mental health stuff together. So it kept the door open. I never really thought I would like clinical work nearly as much as I have. I went and got my license and just never really left direct practice. I have done supervision and some sort of bigger programming type things, but piece where I really, really feel my cup is full and that soul feeling is in the direct practice because you can see somebody and see their progress and see where they were and see where they are and see where they're going. It's really exciting and humbling to be allowed into some of people's most vulnerable states and experiences.
So you're talking about what was most gratifying. So that sounds like that aligns. So as people are doing that, you were talking about what was most gratifying. I'm curious as we start to wind down, I've got 2 more questions. If you could go back to your younger self, right? Or are you taking on clients, Elizabeth?
I do have a couple of slots open for clients. One thing that's nice is because now I work entirely for myself. I get to pick who I work with and how many hours I work and kind of what kind of work I do. I am taking on clients. If people are interested, they can reach out to me and I'm sure you'll put my info and all of the notes. I always like to set up a call and get a sense of, is this going to be a good fit?
100%. And we've added you to our internal resource.
Fantastic.
For therapists. So I'll just make sure that everybody gets that and your contact info. So if you could go back to that, your just post-college self or as you're finishing college, because you went straight in, you went, right? Sometimes call it K through JD.
Preschool through JD, really.
Through JD. So you're kind of a college senior self. What might you tell her now?
I would have told her to go work at a law firm for a year. It will be okay. You will have a job. You will find something to do. You have a skill set. Learn what it means to work in the real life setting versus just in the land of theory, which unfortunately is a lot of what law school I found to be. Yeah. And I think that would have likely dissuaded me from pursuing a JD.
Interesting. If it doesn't feel like something you would tell your clients, like what would you tell like other women lawyers who were thinking about making a career change and going back to school?
It would really depend on what it was. In other words, what is the problem that you're trying to fix? What are the issues that you are having? Because if the problem is, and I'm just saying hypothetically, that you don't know how to say no, well, that's going to keep on following you regardless of whatever job you're at. It depends on what the issue is. If the issue is, well, I like the work, but it's too many hours. Okay, well, maybe that doesn't need to be a whole uproot of what you're doing. Or if it's, I don't like the work, I don't like the hours, I don't know what to do, then it would be a matter of, okay, well, what hobbies do you have? And what things do you enjoy? And if, I'll ask the question of, if you had a free weekend, how would you spend it? Who would you want to spend it with? Do you want to spend time alone? Do you want to spend time with people? Actually, I have several clients right now who are exploring that, who don't know what their next step is. They just know that where they are is not where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, because that's essentially so Will is structured to take people through that process and obviously not to do therapy with them. We send them to people like you. And there's so many people in Will who have a therapist and are in coaching. And I find that that works really, really well. If they want that insight of like, why am I doing this? Why do I have these patterns? And they want to heal some of their past
Absolutely.
wounds.
Because I will say, you asked me the moments that are also really gratifying. I forgot to mention, it's also the moments where people finally make the connection of, oh, this is why I do X, or this is why I show up in this way. And they're able to really understand that in a meaningful way. That's also really powerful.
This is, I think, my last question. And then I want to see if anyone else has it. So if you were to have to take those long drives again today, and you didn't have podcasts and you didn't have what do you think would be occupying your mind in terms of your career? I mean, there's a lot of things.
I'm really satisfied with what I'm doing. I think I'm always looking for a new challenge. I'm always kind of thinking, well, what's next and what more could I be doing? I do have that kind of internal conversation with myself. Thus far, I haven't thought of anything that I'd want to do in place of what I'm doing. I have ideas of things I might at some point want to do in addition to what I'm doing, but I can't think of anything I'd rather do.
Do you ever run groups?
I used to. I don't currently.
I find in Will, one of the things that people are often surprised that they like so much is that they find a lot of solace in seeing that they're not alone.
Yeah, it's really powerful when you realize, oh, I'm not the only one having these conversations or thinking these things.
Yeah. Let's just see, does anybody else have a question? All right, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I don't feel like I have so much a question. It's just this was the Will journey. Like you just said it. I mean, you were meant to be a therapist because the fact that you got there. Did you work with Will? I was late at the beginning because I can tell. The fact that you got there yourself is pretty incredible, but literally, you're just speaking to everything that we talk about in every session that keeps us from becoming the people we are meant to become. It's everything. So I couldn't figure out how to text that or message that. So thank you for coming on. And I can't wait to see you a lot more in a lot more things, because once you get in this community, you are in it for a life. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was beautiful. We'll have to talk and explore ways to bring you back because, I'm not a therapist. Things come up for people that are pretty profound in this journey. And I do think I totally agree. You definitely went on what I would call a Will journey. And I always tell people, look, you can do it on your own. You absolutely can. And I think Will makes it easier and faster. And when you're going together, breaks that isolation. And it's easier to overcome those internal, often barriers of oh no, I need to be very pragmatic since the lawyer brain is trained to be that and not take risks. So you definitely got there on your own, and I'm here to help other people who are struggling to do that. And it sounds like you are too. So it's beautiful.
Well, thank you, everyone. This was lovely. Thank you for having me here and getting a chance to connect with you all. This was wonderful.
Thanks so much. How can they find you? We'll put all the notes there too.
You can always find me. You can go to my website. It's Yael Eiserike, YaelEiserike.com. So first name, last name.com. There you have my phone number, email, all of the things, but that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much.